Genomics data is crucial for understanding genetic diseases, personalizing medicine, and unlocking secrets of human evolution. However, progress in sequencing human genomic data is slow due to inherent challenges such as its complexity and size, variability, errors, and interpretation of results. Now, how can genomic studies such as the SG100K improve health outcomes and advance biomedical innovation? And in the age of AI, how can it be leveraged to overcome the challenges of decoding complex genomic data? To learn about the work so far, the lessons already learned, and the opportunities ahead, we have in the room today Dr. Sebastian Maurer-Stroh, Executive Director of the Bioinformatics Institute at A*STAR. We are also joined by Matt Johnson, Managing Director for AI and Data at Temus. Thanks for joining us today. Maybe you could go around the table and have a quick introduction about what you do. Sebastian.
Thanks. Well, I'm the director of the Bioinformatics Institute. I'm here in Singapore since 16 years, and in A*STAR we work on all types of questions that help to improve the lives of our citizens and also improve the economy. And health is an important aspect. So in the Bioinformatics Institute, we look at different types of data. For example, starting from the genome, that then becomes translated into proteins, into three-dimensional structures that do the work, back into the cells and human tissues and whole human bodies. So handling this data, organizing it, structuring it, understanding it, so that we can develop AI algorithms to create value out of it, this is what we do.
Thank you.
Hey, Paul, it's great to be with you today. So I'm Managing Director of AI and Data at Temus. We're dedicated to taking this powerful technology and applying it to deliver benefits to the society that we serve. We're specifically passionate about the latest developments and finding ways and innovative techniques to apply this to real-world problems. We span from the public sector, supporting government, all the way through local Singapore companies, and also global multinationals. And we serve them with a passion, very much towards creating impact and delivering value. The technologies are sometimes very complex, sometimes just a touch little bit intimidating. And clearly what we're trying to do is personalize that and make it relevant to people and deliver real benefits to people in their lives every day.
Thank you. So let's jump right in, shall we? So how can genomics be leveraged to improve health outcomes today?
I think one very current example has been during the pandemic. You see a lot of genomes have been sequenced globally, and of course also in Singapore. Genome, you can think of it, is just a sequence of the letters. In this case, bases, but it's like letters, so it's like a language. So you could put it in a book, and a virus is a small book to the level that you can read it quickly and you can analyze sentences, different chapters in it. And you can deduce from some of the changes that you see what is translating from the change into, for example, how the virus can infect or how it can escape vaccines. So a virus as a language, as a book, has only 30,000 letters. But if you scale this up now to a human being, it has 3 billion letters. And this is, of course, much more complex. But the concept is the same. We look at the changes in these letters, and we try to find how this translates into health differences or also into treatment differences. And it's an important aspect that the current programs, for example, the precision medicine program in Singapore, are starting to leverage on how can you benefit from knowing the sequence of a person to better treating them as well as understanding their family history.
Thank you. Matt.
Yeah, so we're very excited about our opportunity to partner with Sebastian and also the Precise Project Singapore. We see a couple of major potential benefits from the technology. The first is really around preventative care. By understanding people's genomic codes, it gives us a little bit of an insight about how their bodies work and potentially how they might sometimes fail to work. And clearly by understanding that ahead of time, it's possible to potentially intervene early to provide preventative care, and especially when people get sick, to potentially provide precise care that's targeted specifically about their genetic coding. So essentially we can use this information to treat them better, more precisely, to use, for example, the right type of treatment and the right level of treatment to give them the most effective care that we can give to each individual, because everybody's different. And ultimately what we're finding from the books that Sebastian has spoken of is those books tell us a lot about people. And if we understand them well, then obviously we can treat them better. And study of genomics is really around using this information to best provide the best care we can.
Thank you. So having said that, right, I mean, short books on viruses, longer books on the human bodies, how close are we to realizing the potential of personalized medicine? And what are main barriers really that we are currently up against?
So there are many well-known variants that would also change treatment, or that we understand what the disease a person has. If we just take an example that also the Singapore Precision Medicine program has been looking at familial hypercholesterolemia, people that have high cholesterol levels. And this can happen even early in life. They do not know that they have high cholesterol levels, but they are at higher risk of heart disease also earlier in their life. And through the genetic screen, one could detect a certain mutation that can occur in the population, and they can start treatment earlier. And this prevents potential heart attacks 10 years later they could have. With the treatment, this could be avoided. It's also because it's genetics. If you find one person, then you may also want to screen the siblings and the family, which could have the same kind of predisposition. Another more current example also is cancer treatment. Nowadays, when you're diagnosed with cancer, there is a lot of additional tests that can be done to identify what kind of cancer it is, even at the genomic level, what kind of mutations your cancer has, because this will determine what treatment you will get. And also, once the cancer becomes resistant to one, you can quickly change to another treatment. And one of these efforts is also from one of our colleagues, Dr. Jingmei Li, for breast cancer screening. It is important that it's not just the technology about sequencing, but it's also about communicating. The patient needs to understand what is the risk and the potential to make decisions. And I think the challenges going towards this is, how can we expand the knowledge of when can we really say for a variant there needs to be a new treatment change? And towards that, as part of the SG10K project, we have worked on a project called SNP-Drug 3D, where we essentially map every mutation that we see in a Singapore population genomic data to known drug binding sites. So we know that the genes translate into proteins. These are three-dimensional structures. So you can think of it like you have your hand open, and then like an apple that you would catch with a hand is a drug that is bound to the protein. And when there is a mutation, just like one of the fingers slightly different, you will see it's different how you catch the apple. And this is essentially how you determine if a drug could be affected by a certain mutation. And we've screened more than 5 million variants in the SG10K data in order to find those that make difference for the drug binding. And I'm also happy to say that this is one of the projects we are working on with Temus to bring this forward.
Thank you. You mentioned the SG10K. Why are we doing the SG10K in the first place? I mean, is it possible to get genomics data from overseas? Or why is that not possible?
There are, of course, also many international projects. Singapore has had a very considerate approach in how to start precision medicine. So the National Precision Medicine Program started first with 10,000 healthy individuals. This came from different cohorts, including Gastro is a birth cohort. And combined together, it has become a baseline of what we know. Important is here the spectrum of the local population, which is different from other parts in the world. And then going forward from SG10K, the SG100K has been already sequencing half of them already. And going forward, there may be the third phase, going up to 10% of the population to be sequenced.
Well, thank you. Matt, over to you.
Yeah, so I think a couple of features I'd like to draw out. The first, I think Sebastian's mentioned specifically, which is how do we target precisely certain conditions, and how can we predict how certain interventions will or will not be successful. But beyond things like chemotherapy and other such treatments, something like radiotherapy, ultimately how a cancer will respond to different types of treatment is also something that we can predict. So I think it's about the broad spectrum of treatment, whether that's drug-based or say, example, radiotherapy-based. It's trying to predict exactly how a condition will respond to a certain type of treatment. And I think one of the great advantages that Singapore has in this context is the wide diversity of different ethnic backgrounds that we have here. And that's clearly a key asset for the program, because the more diversity, the more we're able to broadly serve the population, but specifically make these more accessible to countries around our region.
Thank you. Matt, for the next question, I'll start off with you again. We talk about AI and how can AI help to overcome some of the challenges that comes along with analyzing genomics data?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think we start with, the point that Sebastian had made. The human genome is a very big book, estimated around 3 billion base pairs. That's about a gigabyte of data. Now, in a modern context, a gigabyte doesn't sound so big, but ultimately it's about 10% of the size of Wikipedia. So in 10 people, you essentially have already the contents of all of the world's knowledge. So it's a ginormous set of data, and ultimately no human really practically can understand that sequence in its full entirety. So one of the real potential uses of AI is to start to get to really understand this in a very granular level. What we've learned over the past 5 years, and I'm saying starting from language models like BERT, one of the original large language models, is that these models have amazing power to understand very large amounts of text. And ultimately, that ability to learn a lot of detail and then use that in subsequent generations is unmatched, right? So this is superhuman capability that our AIs now have. It's not general, but it's certainly superhuman. Now, when it comes to understanding this very large book of the human genome, clearly a tool like this is of great importance. So the ability to both understand genetic material, understand it in the context of other parts of the human body, be that metabolic pathways or proteins, or potentially even the scientific research and understanding how these interact is of critical importance. And AI, with its power, really has an opportunity to help us with this process.
Sebastian, what do you have to add on this?
Yeah, I think especially in the last point, Matt, you talk about multi-omics data. So we say omics data is all the other data. It's not just genomics, it's proteomics, metabolomics. It's images of the patients, it's their electronic health record data. So integrating all of this means you're in fact looking at multi-dimensional layers of data that needs to be integrated. And obviously AI is one of the ways how we can reduce that complexity. It's also important that there are different ways of looking at AI in terms of remaining explainable. We, in some cases, need to avoid seeing AI as a black box tool, but rather we need to understand exactly how the AI predicts what it does in order to make the right interpretation and decisions. And I agree with the fact that AI has superhuman abilities to see things that we don't see. And in the end, you will always need domain expertise, because you want to avoid the AI sees something that is much simpler to explain through, let's say, there is a classical example when you look at images for skin cancer, that one of the most associated factors with cancer was a ruler. In fact, always when there was cancer presented, there was a ruler below to measure the size of the spot on the skin. And the AI predicted that consequently the ruler must be the one that is associated with cancer. And these are examples where the data preparation and the understanding of the types of data and cleaning and normalization, standardization is the first step for us to be able to reliably use AI. So this is some of the challenges that we rely and depend on AI, but we want to make sure we can still understand that it doesn't make mistakes.
I think you kind of answered my next question really, right? I think it's really important for biomedical researchers and AI experts to work hand in hand. Could you share a little bit more about what are some ways that perhaps you have been working with Temus on this front?
Yeah. I think it's very important example when what I described is you need someone with domain expertise, which could be the doctor, the clinician. For example, if you have a radiologic image and the doctor quickly sees some of the features, but you don't want the label of the hospital or the department in the left corner tell that, okay, this is lung cancer because it's the oncology department with this doctor who is specialized in lung cancer. This is where the domain expert can help the computer scientists and software engineers. At the same time, of course, this domain expert or doctor does not know how to write an algorithm, how to choose the right algorithm for that problem. And this is where then the interaction comes. And there was a project that we also did with Temus, where we were looking how would a user interact with the interface and how can we design the input so that the flow of information is how a user would normally try to interact with the interface. And then in the background, the AI runs and makes a prediction that is presented in an understandable way.
Without sound as powerful as AI is, there are many, many mistakes that can creep in without the right expertise on both AI and the doctors involved.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think it's an important observation to make that our AIs are essentially learning from us, right? The way that GPT-4 and GPT-3 was trained was to read a lot of human texts. So ultimately, like any student, students can make mistakes. And interestingly enough, the way in which ChatGPT was trained and how it differed from the underlying GPT was that it had good parents. Essentially, the algorithm that best to understand it is that essentially the way it was trained was first it was sent to the library to read maybe 500 million books, quite a good amount for a student. It was then given some good parenting, otherwise technically known as reinforcement learning from human feedback. I think I just call it parenting. But essentially, it's a matter of trying to align the machine with the intents and purposes that best serve us. Ultimately, that needs to continue. I was aware of the two cases that Sebastian raised, and they're classic in its case. But interesting enough, those sorts of biases actually can be detected. And I think one of the things that we've enjoyed most in working with Sebastian is allowing us to deliver against our mission. Ultimately, part of the reason that Temus was formed was to assist Singapore in becoming a smart nation. And ultimately, achieving that goal really requires partnership. And what we've really enjoyed most with the collaboration with BII and with Sebastian's team is the ability to put those two strengths together. Ultimately, as Sebastian mentioned, we're focused on data engineering or user experience or AI, and those are the areas that we have expertise. Genomics and bioinformatics are something very new to us, and we very much enjoy learning. But it's by putting our skills together, those complementary skills, that I think we can achieve the most. And that's what we're really enjoying most about the partnership.
Fantastic. Now, given the concerns about bias in AI algorithms, I mean, we hear them talk about all the time. How can we ensure that AI in genomic sequencing is equitable and unbiased?
Yes, I think bias is always a concern for AI. It has been the case since, earlier versions of AI perhaps would be used for credit scoring, whereby you need to be very sure that when you're granting credit, especially to an individual, that what you're doing is irrespective of perhaps their ethnic background or other things that are irrelevant and could potentially skew the decision. And consequently, there's been a good level of expertise that's been developed in ensuring that algorithms are fair and equitable. But beyond that, it really comes back to data. Ultimately, if you want an algorithm or a process to be fair to all individuals, you need to have good representation of all of those individuals in the study. And as we were discussing before, one of the advantages that Singapore brings to this is potentially a much more diverse population. So equity starts with participation and making sure that everybody is participating in the study. And I think it's this combination of both algorithmic caution and care to make sure that algorithms are indeed doing what we want them to do, and also representation in the data sets.
Yeah, I think it's an advantage also being here in the region because there are different Asian populations coming together. And although there are other bigger genome programs also in other parts of the world, the advantage here is it comes together with the high tech and the mindset of doing an unbiased research. So, for example, our colleagues from the Genome Institute of Singapore are generating a lot of the genomes that are coming out that then we are helping to analyze with our complementary tools. They have put together a platinum reference genome, which allows to use us as a base to compare more accurately compared to taking the classical Western references. And I think in understanding also the uniqueness of Asian biology, Singapore is well positioned because there is a lot of different research going on also at the cellular level, understanding how changes in the genome translate to changes in the cells and then later to the bodies. And this representativeness that Matt also mentioned is one of the big considerations that the National Precision Medicine Program here also has.
Right. Before I ask about any last thoughts or last words that you have, let me go on to the last official question here. How do you envision the role of AI evolving in the healthcare sector over the next decade?
So I think there are a lot of opportunities. We mentioned also that it's not a genome alone. It's understanding that the genome translates to proteins. The proteins are machines working in cells, but we have all these other additional clinical data. We have, for example, radiology images. We even have lifestyle data, real world data. So I think an important aspect for the healthcare sector will be that we will better be able to connect this data, removing biases, because a lot of our behavior still is culturally influenced as well. So even step counts, there will be times in the day we'll walk more, and we need to make sure only the significant portion of the data is used, or it's normalized in a way that it's always comparable. And I think then there is a great opportunity. And I think, Matt, you mentioned that early on. The aim really is not just to reach the patient when there is the problem, but way in advance, so that in the patient journey, we can predict early when a problem would occur, make interventions, and prevent the problems from occurring in the first place.
So I think it's exciting times for us in the AI space. Clearly, there's a lot going on, and the pace of change is quite stupendous, really. Every day, new developments come up, and it's very hard for us to keep up to date. But I think a couple of themes are coming out that perhaps I would share. The first is just really an understanding of the scale of what's happening at the moment. If we look back about 250 years ago, we had the advent of the Industrial Revolution. And during that period, the world fundamentally transformed from an agrarian culture, where everybody was out in the fields growing plants to eat, into those essentially whereby that we were working with machines. What happened is that the first superhumanly strong machines came out, whether that was steam engines or water systems. Yeah. So we moved from a space where the human and perhaps the horse was the primary force to machines taking up that role. Our society fundamentally changed, and it gave us enormous wealth. We're sitting today in an air-conditioned office, some 20 stories above the ground. And that would have been impossible, 250 years ago. Simply the technology to build such high buildings didn't exist. And certainly the technology to build working air conditioning likewise didn't exist. So this revolution of physical machines has, essentially made the world that we live in today. We're now going through a period whereby the same is happening for intelligence. We've talked today about machines that are superhumanly intelligent. Not generally so, right? These are very specific types of intelligence, but nonetheless, in their specific domain, they exceed human capability in clearly intelligent tasks. Now, ultimately, this marks a step change in our civilization, whereby the machines can start doing specific tasks for us. Now, that it can be threatening, and several have suggested that AI potentially could be a civilization-threatening development. But if we look on the positive side, it's equally liberating. And I would call out a few areas, I think, that excite me. The first is in research itself. Temus, CEO of Google DeepMind, said solve intelligence and use that to solve everything else. Ultimately, initial research has shown that language models trained on databases of research start to become superhumanly good at predicting outcomes. So not only can we use AI to support treatments, we can actually use it to support fundamental research. And the first examples of that are just starting to come out, whereby we use it as a means of exploration, not just as a means of treatment. I think we've spoken about several of the other areas, which is the development of new therapies. So the ability, for example, to discover targets and then drug treatments that will essentially hit those targets effectively. AI is showing great promise in doing that a lot faster and be able to go through candidates much faster than any human could do. And then finally, in terms of diagnostics and treatments. So all the way from research all the way through the treatment, there's potential input of AI. And I think also to note on what Sebastian said, I think the future of AI is multimodal. I think most of us have experienced AI in the context of things like ChatGPT, whereby we're having a conversation in text or perhaps in voice with a system. But increasingly, these systems are capable of understanding sound. They're capable of understanding pictures and making sense of that. Now, if we put this in the context of bioinformatics, as Sebastian was alluding to, this means that we can start to understand the whole complex system of a human body, whether it's genomics, it could be in RNA, it could be in proteins, it could be in metabolic pathways, it could be in all sorts of other data, the images and so forth. And if we combine that with the research data and ability to speak as a doctor would speak or as a scientist would speak, then potentially we have a great research partner ahead of ourselves that we could interrogate, we can discuss with, and can assist us in the process of research. So I'm personally very excited about the opportunity to combine the leading edge of AI and the systems that are coming up to do that, together with the really critical domain expertise that Sebastian and his team brings, and putting that together to really explore this collectively together.
Thank you. Would you have any advice or comments for someone who is on the threshold of joining genomics or AI?
I think it's very good to also mention that this works well in Singapore because there's an ecosystem of multiple partners working together. So when we work together with Temus, we are forming a hub where others also can benefit. So you have the angle of translating the software development into, let's say, the biological questions. But for example, you have great expertise, the Genome Institute of Singapore. Then we have additional AI institutes in East, IHBC and I2R, that are also working with PII on this joint effort of having biomedical data interpretable, where then you get the software expertise from Temus coming in. So I recommend that there are many different flavors that the people can look into, what their preference is, but the opportunities are endless, and it's a very exciting time. And there have been breakthrough developments with AI in the recent years, and how we leverage this in biomedical space, I think, will also in the near future. And I would say if you think of AI in drug discovery alone, which also is genomically informed, you end up finding the right targets with the right drugs for the right patients. Then this is how you realize how AI genomics goes into public health outcomes.
It's a great question. And frankly, I get asked it frequently because AI is a very popular space, and people often ask me, how do I get in? And ultimately, the answer is sometimes surprises people. Essentially, AI is a very fast-moving domain. And one of the most important skills, perhaps be it a passion, is an excitement and a passion for the topic. So, go with your passion, spend time learning. And learning is a continual process with us. It's a daily, weekly process in AI. We have to, stay up to date with the latest developments. So I think the first is learning, is continual learning. And the second one is to try something. Because ultimately, the most exciting part about AI today is while, there's some big companies doing some amazing things, it's possible for an enthusiast with a computer at home to actually do their own experiments. It's an amazingly accessible field. And there are many superstars that have been born in the AI world that just started out with a small project. So I think the exciting times is the opportunity for people to take a passion, to start learning, and then to try something. And when we come to interview folk to join our team, one of the things that we're most excited about is people who have their own private projects and who speak about them. And it's that passion to explore, to try new things, even if they fail, that I think is most important.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Matt. We have come to the end of our podcast today. Thank you for tuning in.